It's done! Oh my goodness! Welcome to the game, Carroll! Oh, Darnell Mooney inside the 10. Oh, and it's intercepted! Peyton Ellis the pick. Stride it out, Jesse! Touchdown and left! No chance! Oh my God! Oh my heavens!
All right, well, we welcome you to the latter half of week 2 as we get set for Sunday night football and a national championship rematch as Michael Penix Jr. and the Atlanta Falcons take on J.J. McCarthy and the Minnesota Vikings. Thank you guys so much for joining us for the Falcons pregame show. So excited to have you guys tonight. Taylor Vismor, Derek Rackley. We're going to be with you guys for the next 30 minutes or so. Lots to talk about because both of these teams had nail-biting games last week. But before we get to that, you were calling a nail-biting game last night.
Yes, I was in Knoxville, Tennessee yesterday. A little Tennessee, Georgia that not only went down to the wire, we got bonus football in that one, and it was a sheer classic. It was truly a joy to be on the call for that one. You know why she brings this up, right?
Come on,
because this one here is a bulldog.
Listen, and I try to keep my journalistic integrity by,
emphasis on try.
I
Air
try
quotes,
with not being biased, but when it comes to the dogs, I don't work in college football. I can be biased when it comes to the Georgia Bulldogs, and let me just say, I was a happy girl last night when the dogs
I always know when I come in, right? I come in on a Sunday after a Saturday when Georgia plays. I already know if I didn't see the game, granted I was on the call yesterday, if I didn't see the game, it's either smiles or it's...
Yeah. Well, yeah, today it was smiles. Today it was smiles. But let's go ahead and get into the game that we have tonight. Let's actually take a look in the recap. Let's look at last week because although the Dogs had a win this week, the Falcons did not have a win last week against Tampa Bay Buccaneers, losing 23-20 all the way up until the end. But I think what you saw in the Falcons, they answered a lot of questions of what this team could be going into 2025. What did you take away from last week's game against the Buccaneers? Yeah,
there was some good and there was some not so good. And that's what you could say pretty much all the time when your team ends up losing because wins are so precious in the National Football League. And it seems like every once in a while you turn on the TV or you pull up box scores and you see somebody gets blown out. But by and large, games end up are close in the National Football League. That's why kicking becomes such a huge issue. Obviously, we'll get into that a little bit later. Red zone, third downs, turnovers, all the little things become so important in the National Football League because by and large, games end up coming down to the wire, whether it's the last 4 minutes, whether it's a kick at the end of the game, whether it's into overtime, because there's so much parity in the National Football League. So what went well? Bijan Robinson was electric out of the backfield. Michael Penix Jr. answered a lot of questions on what he's going to be able to do as the starting quarterback for this offense. I felt like the defense looked faster. They looked more athletic. Didn't necessarily get the plays that we needed to, especially down the stretch. There was a lot of positives, but when you lose, you also go back and you look at all the negatives. You figure out how can we get better from areas that we struggled with, one of those being the kicking situation, which is an area that they addressed this week.
Yeah, you bring up two of the biggest names on this Falcons offense. They finished on offense with 358 total yards, 2 touchdowns. Let me ask about Penix, so let's start there because I think there was so much anticipation going into week 1 of what Michael Penix could bring to the table with all of these weapons around him. Of course, Mooney was not in the game last week. He was inactive. But when you watched him through all 4 quarters, I think you saw him taking really impressive shots downfield, but he was also managing the game really well as well. So what did you take away from Michael's first start in the 2025 season?
It's actually something that's not even about his actual play, but it's about his demeanor. Like, how much have we talked about with Michael Penix, how just cool he is, how relaxed he seems. Even if you watch like his press conferences, he's just not the overly animated guy, which sometimes you say, well, your quarterback, do you want him to be the most animated guy in the room? Or do you want him to have passion? Or do you want him like Tom Brady directing people what to do and getting in their face when they make mistakes? There's more than one way to skin a cat, right? Isn't that the old phrase, how it goes? And Michael Penix just looked super calm, under control, looked like he managed the offense extremely well. Even when the play clock was getting down under 10, under 5, he didn't look like he panicked. He's like, we've got this. We send the guy in motion. It just seemed like his operation was very smooth, which to me, for a young quarterback, that's very impressive. That's encouraging to see when your young quarterback doesn't look like the moment is too much for him. Now, granted, it's not like it was his first start. He's played in hostile environments. He's going to play in another one tonight, but those are the things that I look for, the little things, right? Sometimes it's the intangibles is how does he handle adversity? How does he handle when the run game gets stuffed like it did? Well, they started calling more pass plays, and what did he do? He ended up kind of surgically working his way around the field. And then towards the end, the effort that he showed on the layout to pick up the first down, and then the rushing touchdown showed me a lot. Not like I questioned that he didn't have that, but that just shows the competitiveness and what he's willing to do for this team. And quite frankly, an element that they did not have with Kirk Cousins. We all knew that, right? But until you actually get a chance to see it play out on the field, you're like, oh, there's a different element that this offense is going to have this year with his athleticism.
Yeah, I know I brought it up last week with you, but everyone kind of always talks about with quarterbacks, especially of do they have the it factor? And everyone's been saying, oh, I think Michael Penix has it. They have it. And no one can ever explain what it is. But for me, I think what you saw last week in Michael Penix, especially in that fourth quarter, especially really in that 2-minute, which felt like a 40-minute drive, honestly, was you saw like kind of this mental fortitude that he has. We talk about the composure that he has all the time, but that's kind of how he is in the building. He's this quiet guy, but you know that he's the leader of the pack in a way. And I think you were able to see him seize the day, seize the moment as he saw fit. He had this mental fortitude of, yeah, it might be 4th and inches, but we're going to go for it here, and we're going to keep going for it here, and we're going to make these really impressive throws into the end zone that obviously did not end up the way that they wanted them to, but he was not afraid of the moment, and he didn't shy away from taking a chance and taking a leap of faith in the other guys on his offense.
I think of a word that I kind of throw around with football players. He has the juice. Right?
Okay, the juice.
He played with some juice, right? It was not necessarily with the way he wasn't boisterous or anything, but just with some of the plays that he made. You're like, okay, this guy does kind of have another gear in his competitiveness, which is what you want to see. Not only does the coaching staff feel a lot more comfortable about the decision that they made and the guy that they have leading this organization, but think about the rest of the teammates, right? I will never forget when I played for the Atlanta Falcons, the juice that Michael Vick had, right? The confidence that we had in him when it was kind of gut time, like we needed to play, a lot of us were like, hey, Mike, just go ahead and do your thing, okay? And oddly enough, we've got another Mike here. It's gonna look a little different than it did with Michael Vick, but you want your quarterback to have that juice, that when the game is on the line, he wants the ball in his hands and he wants to go make a play. And we saw a little bit of that from Michael Penix in week 1. And guess what, Taylor? It's only gonna get better the more experience he gets and the more that this game slows down for him. 16
more games for Michael Penix, at least in this season right now. But someone else that I think everyone kind of counted on in those moments was Matt Ryan, not just Mike Vick, but Matt Ryan as well. And something I love so much about Matt Ryan is he always talks about, yes, I had the ability to be clutch in some moments, but I was not able to be clutch if it wasn't for the guys in front of me. Those are the most important players for a quarterback. So let's kind of transition now to talking about the offensive line and what they were able to do. Because again, there were questions about what Michael Penix would be able to do, but there were more questions about how the offensive line would protect him and how they would be able to give him time. What did you take away last week from the line?
Yeah, I think there was a lot of uneasiness about the right tackle position. And Elijah Wilkinson, I thought, fared extremely well. Like, you look at pass protection, and they gave up 1 sack in the game, and they threw the ball 42 times. To me, that is a win. So you feel confident about the pass protection, obviously knowing that the blind side changes a little bit with a left-handed quarterback. I thought Wilkinson held up well. I thought the rest of the offensive line held up well against a pass rush when they got themselves into predictable situations where Atlanta had to throw the football. Remember, going up against Todd Bowles, who's a very attacking style head coach / defensive coordinator for the Buccaneers, knowing that they're going to get some exotic looks, they did a nice job of picking it up. Now, the flip side of that is I got to make sure I'm honest too, is the offensive line did not do a good enough job in run blocking. This team is set up too well to be one of the better running football teams in the National Football League, and quite frankly, it wasn't good enough. And I think if I was in one of the meetings this past week, I'm sure that's what the offensive coaching staff and the offensive line coach would have been telling the team is, guys, it wasn't good enough. For us to have Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier in the backfield and get shut out, yes, you could say, well, you know what, Tampa's a really good defensive team, and they're stingy against the run. Let me tell you one thing I learned in my NFL career. It's that excuses either get players cut or lose football games. So you don't make excuses. It's, did you get the job done or did you not? That's just the nature of the beast in the National Football League. So that has to be an adjustment, an area that gets better against Minnesota today. Again, playing against a really good defensive coordinator and a good defensive front. This offense has got to be able to run the football. So that was one area that the O-line did not fare well in last week.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note that they did not play very well with the run, because it is kind of the cornerstone of what this Falcons offense kind of runs behind, is the running back room of this Falcons offense. And I think last year they averaged 29 attempts per game in the rush for 130 yards on average a game. Last week they had 28 attempts, only 69 yards.
Yeah.
And I think that is a lot of that has to do with the offensive line of, are they creating lanes for these rushers to go through, including Michael Penix when he does have to scramble? Are there options for them to go A gap, B gap, whatever it might be? You've got to give them some room to get through those gaps and to be able to make some explosive plays downfield.
You have to be able to play offense with balance.
Yeah.
There's very few teams out there that can say, you know what, we're going into this game, you know that we're going to throw the ball 75% of the time and stop us, right? There's very few teams out there that are that fortunate to have the offensive line, the quarterback, and the wide receivers against NFL talent and defensive coordinators when they know exactly what you're going to do. It can't happen. You've got to have balance, and this team, especially because of the way it's built, they've got to have better balance. So that's got to be something that is there tonight against the Vikings.
Yeah, and last thing I'll quickly say about the run game, I think when you ever talk to players in this league, they always say there's always a couple guys that we always star that are on the rosters, whether it's on defense, if we're on offense, or we're defensive players, we're starring some offensive players' names. And I think that this running room in general, you're starring both of these guys, and this is a main thing that you want to attack as a defense. So if this offensive line can't figure out how to get the run game going early on and establish that run game, all these defenses, they're going to try to eliminate the run game as quickly as possible for this Falcons team and make them one-dimensional. But let's kind of transition into the third phase of the game, that 23-20. It happens.
Yep.
Koo missed the kick last week against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the go-ahead kick to take us to overtime.
Yep.
He did not, just want to be transparent here, he was not traveling with the team to Minnesota Vikings today. He will not be active and he will not play tonight against the Vikings. When that happens, when you have a kicker that seems to lose the sparkle just a little bit, how do you handle that as a coach, as a front office? Where do you go from there?
Yeah, I mean, that's Raheem Morris was asked a lot of that this week in his press conference. I believe those were the first questions that he was asked after the game, or on Monday when he met with the media, was basically address the kicker situation. And he did talk about having conversations with Younghoe Koo and trying to understand where he was at mentally. I made a comment about this on our podcast the other day, but it's really hard, in my opinion, having been in an NFL locker room and had coaches that nobody on the coaching staff was ever really a kicker, a long snapper, or a punter. So they don't necessarily understand the mental struggles at times, whereas a lot of times offensive coordinators are former quarterbacks that did play in the National Football League. You have linebackers that used to play in the league. You have offensive linemen or coaches that used to play offensive line in the National Football League. So they know when guys start struggling with things, how do you get them out of the rut? A lot of times, Taylor, it doesn't happen with specialists. You know how they get them out of the rut? They find somebody else.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that's the nature of the beast. Younghoe Koo struggled a little bit last year, right? We saw that. It wasn't one of his best years. Coaches applauded him for the offseason that he had, really went to work and tried to get back to doing some of the basics right. And he won the job coming out of training camp, but in week one, it kind of reared its ugly head, and the organization felt like there was no choice but for them to make a move, try to get some new blood in there, because they understand how important knocking down field goals at any point in the game, nonetheless at the end.
Exactly. Koo, over the last 10 games, he has completed or made 15 of 23 field goals, and Raheem Morris said in his press conferences earlier in the week, it's a black and white position, like you said earlier. They either make it or they don't, and if they don't make it, then we got to find somebody else. And of course, they brought in Parker Romo. He was added to practice squad earlier in the week. They have a standard elevation for him from the practice squad to 53-man roster. He will be the kicker for the Falcons tonight. Let's go ahead and talk about some other young blood that you were kind of talking about earlier. Xavier Watts. Let's talk about this defense. Xavier Watts, you have Divine Diablo, Billy Bowman Jr., some really big moments for this defense last week against the Buccaneers. You said at the top of the show, they seem to have new energy for this defense. What excites you the most going into week 2 about this Falcons defense?
Well, we heard a lot about Xavier Watts, obviously coming out of the draft and then him working his way through OTAs, mini camps, and training camp, and it looked like he kind of won that job right from the jump. And I think it was pretty impressive to see them give him the starting nod and him come out and do some really good things in the opening week. Was he perfect? No. He's a rookie that made a start in his very first game of the regular season. the thing that you think about is, okay, where does he go from week 1 to week 2? And then how does he continue to progress throughout the season, playing beside one of the best safeties in the National Football League, getting to learn from Jesse Bates each and every play, each and every meeting, each and every practice on how Jesse Bates diagnoses things, how he takes film apart, how he understands and uses anticipation to be able to make plays on defense. That's where I'm excited, and I'm sure the rest of this team is, to see the development of Xavier Watts. Each and every week he gets to go start next to Jesse Bates, and he is a tremendously athletic player. We know he's got great ball skills from what he did in college, made some really good plays, missed a couple plays in the game, but overall I think this organization is very encouraged about his upside.
Yeah, I really loved watching the Falcons defense as a whole last week because they were flying around. They were everywhere around the ball. You bring up Jesse Bates. He led the team with tackles last week with 7 tackles. Watts and A.J. Terrell, they had 2 pass breakups each. And then Bowman and Diablo, they shared a sack against Baker Mayfield. So I think what you saw in this Falcons defense is only the beginning. Like I said, I'm really excited about Divine Diablo. I've been excited about him since he kind of got here and found his footing with this defense. But I'm excited for what Billy Bowman will be able to do in the coming weeks, and same with Xavier Watts. But we actually spoke to Xavier Watts earlier in the week about what it was like to start his first NFL game and what it was like to come up with some big plays as well.
Yeah, it felt real good. I was smiling when I ran out. Kind of like it's a dream come true. I played in that stadium before, but I mean, it was different having a Falcons jersey on, so just running out there was kind of surreal. First game, felt like I did a good job. Obviously, I had some things still to clean up, but overall, I think it was solid.
You know, X, you know, minus the drops, had he had those drops, shoot, we're talking about the rookie of the week, you know, and definitely put himself in contention for a rookie of the year. You know, he played that type of game. You saw just the exceptional ball skills, instinct, feel that he has. Now we just got to refine it and just keep working with him.
Hey, you in good position. You feel me? You good. You good. Keep being you, bro. You gonna change the game, bro. You gonna change the game. Stay in it.
Before the game, I was a little nervous, but when I got out there, just running around, just playing with confidence.
Very excited for X. Not surprised at all. I was telling you guys that he showed that throughout training camp, throughout the spring, and now it's just you got to continue to do that every single week.
Come on, man. We're gonna make a game-changing play, bro. I know it's coming. I know it's coming.
Coach Brick, you know, it's aggressive. We go wide, heart, mind, fist. I feel like my playing style is perfect for his kind of mindset.
The beauty of X is he doesn't, you know, and I'm getting to know him as we go here, but he just feels like a guy that will never be satisfied. He's just going to keep pushing to get better.
I'm going to try to impact the game, the tackling, the communication with my teammates. Obviously trying to get my hands on some on the ball as well, but you know, just all affecting the game at all levels.
Guys have a little success early on. Sometimes that's dangerous, you know, when they keep their feet up and they believe I got it, and I don't feel that from him at all.
All right, well, Jesse Bates said it to him on the sideline. He said, you're going to change the game. And listen, this might be a hot take right now. It might be an overreaction Tuesday, as people call it. But I do think Xavier Watts, from what we saw on Sunday, from what we saw throughout training camp, and even on his tape from Notre Dame, he has the potential to be one of the best safeties in the league down the stretch as he goes throughout his career. He could possibly have a great year this year, and having someone like Jesse Bates across from you, teaching you, guiding you, cheering you on like he was last week, because obviously Xavier Watts, 2 PBUs, no interceptions. That's going to dig at Xavier Watts. I think that's great. Yeah, you had 2 PBUs, but he wanted those to be picks, and to have Jesse Bates kind of cheering you on, saying, you're going to change the game. It's going to be all right. We're going to get there. I think that's nothing but helpful for a rookie.
Yeah, I mean, he's talking to him on the sideline. He even says when they're on the field, like, I feel it. We're going to make a game-changing play right here. I mean, that's not only the confidence, but like him trusting, and you've got the skills to do this. And one of us is going to make this play. As we know, we've seen Jesse Bates over the years make so many different plays in the secondary, picking off passes. And it'll be interesting to see if it's kind of a yin and yang this year, if it's Bates one game and then Watts the next game, because there's so much ball skills in the secondary. does Xavier Watts get to where he needs to be with his eyes? Does the film study and the game start slowing down to where he starts to see a couple things, takes his eyes there, and boom, he just takes off and he ends up making a play. He's got the ball skills to do it. It'd be interesting to see when his first pick comes.
Yeah, it's going to be really fun. So let's kind of transition now. Let's talk about the standout performances as a whole. You had Xavier Watts as your number one, which we've kind of already talked about him at nauseum, but you can go ahead and take Xavier if you want to.
No, I got Watts. I mean, he's the first. We talked a lot about him. I'm excited about his play because a lot of rookies come into the league and they have these expectations attached. They did all these great things in college, an All-American, he was a captain, but they don't necessarily get the playing time right away, right? But he's getting that opportunity right now. The team felt so good with him. They said, we trust you. You're going to be our starting safety right next to Jesse Bates. And so now it's like, we're giving you the keys. We're not making you do everything on the defense, but learning from Jesse Bates, going out there, just make some more plays and end up being a difference maker on this defense. Who kind of stuck out to you in the
Someone
first
that stuck out to me was Raheem Morris. Not so much a player, but the coach. I think what you saw from Raheem Morris week one, he was throwing challenge flags all over the place. He's calling great timeouts. He's making really good decisions as the head coach of the Falcons in week one. I think I asked AJ Terrell earlier in the week. I got to sit down with him, asked him about what happens when your coach challenges plays. What does that mean for you? And he says it means that he believes in us. He trusts what we are saying to him, that this was a catch or no, it wasn't. And to have that faith in your coach and your coach to have the faith in you makes all the difference in the world. He impressed me, number one, last week against
head coaching is, people don't necessarily feel bad for them because they're in a position, they're making a lot of money, but a lot of times they just get criticized because as soon as things don't go right, they just want to start pointing the fingers at the head coach. And not a lot of times do people give them kudos unless your team ends up being one of the best in the National Football League. You go to the playoffs, you're competing for championships and getting in the Super Bowl. That's when they start to give you all of the praise. But for a coach that's kind of young in his head coaching career, everybody wants to find ways to shoot holes in Raheem Morris. But another guy that stood out to me was Bijan Robinson. Now, we did talk a little bit about the lack of run game, but I want to talk about what he did out of the backfield because we know this kid is special. We know he's electric, but early on, I'm talking first drive of the game, dump off to Bijan Robinson, makes a couple miss like he does all the time, and he just takes it 50 yards to the house. And then constantly throughout the course of the game, Michael Penix would look downfield, and I was going to say check it down, but maybe he just looked for Bijan Robinson because he knows that when you get the football in his hands, good things happen. Didn't run the football extremely well, but you get the ball in his hands, out of the backfield, in open space, and like how many ankles do we see break? How many knees do we say? I use that in jest, okay? I'm not wishing injury upon anybody. I'm just saying that he is that electric and his feet are just fantastic.
Talking about running back, let's kind of switch over to linebacker because I want to talk about Divine Diablo, someone that can stuff the run and stop the run on the defensive side of the ball. Like I said earlier in the show, I was so excited to have him throughout training camp. I'm excited to see what he can do, and I think he allows Caden Ellis to be the best that Caden Ellis can be, and having a player on your team that can elevate other guys and allow them to be the best at their position. I think Caden had a great year last year, but I think he's going to have an even better year this year with Divine across from him. Divine finished the game last week with 6 tackles, half a sack, a QB hit, a tackle for loss, and a pass defense. I mean, the guy was everywhere. He was up at the quarterback. He was back in the backfield. Everywhere that you looked, there was number 0.
Yeah, and he was one of those guys that stuck out to me that said this defense is faster and more physical because some of the plays that he made throughout the game, filling gaps and everything, and the way that he runs sideline to sideline. I agree. I think he ends up making Caden Ellis even better, not to say that Divine Diablo himself doesn't upgrade this defense. Finally, the last person, and we talked about him already, but I'll continue to talk about it, that stuck out to me was the quarterback, Michael Penix Jr. Again, all the expectations placed on the shoulders. Remember, the organization basically said, Kirk Cousins didn't do it for us last year, gave a couple of starts to Michael Penix, but all offseason, all the talk was this is now Michael Penix's team. Gets awarded the captainship coming out of training camp, right? And then it's now all eyes are on your quarterback. Well, that's life in the National Football League, right? That's why guys are drafted in the first round, and they generally get paid more than anybody else in the National Football League. You get the praise, and you get all of the blame when things go bad. But I think he answered the call in week 1. Even though it was losing in performance, there was no questioning that he was competing, and he was out there making plays for his team. So I was impressed. I'm interested to see, again, we talked about a lot, week 1 to week 2.
Yeah.
How does he take that performance onto the road? Does it travel in a hostile environment in Minnesota?
Yeah, well, we might have been impressed with Michael Penix, but it seems like the entire world was impressed with J.J. McCarthy. They have said that this guy is the next GOAT almost. He obviously had an incredible comeback last week against the Bears. Fourth quarter comeback, he had 3 touchdowns there, 2 through the air and 1 from his feet. Obviously, there's been so much anticipation about what J.J. McCarthy could bring to this Vikings offense. Sat out all last year with a knee injury. Now he's back. I mean, everyone overreacts the first couple of weeks in the NFL. What did you take away from J.J. McCarthy that you're excited to see tonight against the Falcons?
Well, I'm not necessarily excited to see a lot of great things from him as we're on a Falcons pregame show.
Of course.
But I mean, listen, the guy was a first-round pick for a reason. He won a national championship at Michigan for a reason because he's handled the spotlight, right? So here's kind of the week 1 comparison of how things did. Michael Penix Jr. given a lot more opportunities through the air, but J.J. McCarthy was very efficient, and he kind of willed his team back from a deficit, kind of back on track, got the ball into the hands of some playmakers, and he can do both things. He can throw it and he can run it. But you're right. I mean, this is an organization that went all in on him as well. They let Sam Darnold get away in free agency. He goes out to Seattle, and they basically said, you know what? We're going to stick by our draft selection in J.J. McCarthy. And, you know, you talked about to start off the show. Remember, these two guys faced off in a pretty important game.
Yeah.
Kind of cool seeing these guys both in their college uniforms here. Of course, Michael Penix ended up coming up short in this one. Michigan ended up winning the national championship. Did throw a couple of interceptions in that game. Had a lot of opportunity. We always say, generally when you're throwing it 51 times, it's not necessarily the best thing for your team. Every once in a while it works out well for you. But these two guys here are going to be competing on a different stage tonight, and not necessarily for a national championship at the college level, but to get their teams moving in the right direction. So J.J. McCarthy, really good young quarterback. I think I saw a stat that this is one of the first times you've seen 2 quarterbacks that have less than 5 starts competing on Sunday Night Football, which is kind of cool to see 2 really young quarterbacks battling in prime time.
Yeah, and something else to note about this Vikings offense is that we talked about it with Michael Penix. It's so important of the guys that you have up front, and no one knows that better than the Vikings. They went all in this year in free agency. They spent let me see if I can find the number, $267 million on free agents. You're looking at this starting offensive line of what we had last week with the Minnesota Vikings. This will probably most likely stand for the starting offensive line this week. Will Fries, Ryan Kelly, and Justin School, those are all guys they got in free agency. Donovan Jackson is the rookie on that offensive line from Ohio State. So, I mean, there's a lot of money on this offensive line to protect someone in their rookie contract.
Yep.
I mean, why is it so important that they're going to put millions upon millions of dollars into the offensive line?
I mean, listen, this is where games are won in the National Football League, is on the line of scrimmage, and we've seen that over the last decade, if you will, with the Atlanta Falcons, investing in their offensive line. And once they find guys that have fit the culture, that have been successful on the field, they have rewarded them. This is what happens across the league, and you've got to be able to get this right. I think about the Kansas City Chiefs and them having some issues on the offensive line. What have they done? They've invested in trying to get the right guys in front of Patrick Mahomes. If your quarterback is running for his life in the National Football League, good luck winning games. There's just way too many talented pass rushers and linebackers and secondary players that if your quarterback doesn't have time to get to 1, 2, 3 in his progression, it's going to be difficult to win in this league. So they invested there. The interesting note that we talked about, Justin School actually filling in for Christian Darrisaw. Justin School has not been playing all that well. I'm hearing a lot of rumors in Minnesota that they don't want him playing. They want another one of their offensive linemen in because they were not impressed by what they saw from Justin School. So I'm sure Atlanta has looked at that in their tape and said, do we have any opportunities to exploit something that he's doing? That's what the National Football League is about. You try to find a weakness, and how do we attack the weakness to create an edge? So keep an eye out and to see what does Atlanta have in their back pocket. What is Jeff Ulbrich going to try to do to see if he can create some one-on-one matchups against School? Yeah,
I just want to quickly note that they gave up 5 quarterback hits and 3 sacks last week against the Bears. Let me ask you this, staying on the offensive line, though, because there are so many names. Obviously, there's a rookie involved. There's only one guy, the right tackle, that is returning as a starter for this Vikings offensive line. How does that help this Falcons defense, that they don't necessarily have the game day continuity that most offensive lines might have.
Yeah, I see where you're going with that. I just would say in this day and age, it's not always the luxury that you have where your offensive line has been together, or a majority of them have been together for, call it 4, 6, 8 years. I mean, Atlanta does have a couple of guys that have played on the same line, and they can finish each other's sentences. They could probably order for their teammate at the restaurant and know exactly what type of dressing they want on. Wait a minute, the offensive linemen don't eat salads. Never mind, nix that out of the conversation. How they want their steak done. I'm just saying that every once in a while you have that luxury, but a lot of times with free agency and guys not playing up to par, there are a lot of changes on offensive lines every year. So, and they have the offseason, they have training camp, they spend so much time together. Yes, it could be an opportunity to try to get the mix up with a lack of communication. Minnesota's playing at home. You think they'd like to be able to communicate fairly well across the offensive line. But as we know, it's an area Atlanta has got to find a way to attack, and it's been the whole offseason focus, right? We got to bring in more pass rushers, and we've got to bring in a new defensive coordinator to try to find a way to create more pressure on the quarterback.
Yeah, so we'll see if they'll be able to create that pressure. But something else about the Minnesota Vikings that kind of everybody knows is their wide receiver core and their skill player core that they have with the Minnesota Vikings. We asked Jesse Bates earlier in the week of what it was going to take to beat these Minnesota Vikings and what it's like to go against this impressive skill position team.
How do you prepare for J.J. McCarthy in this game? You have one game of film, but I mean, do you go back to college, or how do you prepare?
Yeah, I think you kind of go back, to some of his college film to kind of see the quarterback mannerisms. How is he dropping back, and all that good stuff. But yeah, you just look at the scheme. The scheme hasn't changed. Obviously, Addison isn't playing, but they got Naylor out there for his position now. But very similar offense. All you can really do is go back to his Michigan tape, like I said, is kind of see what his dropbacks looks like and all that good stuff. But the offense is the offense, so you just kind of prepare for that. And, we know that he's a runner as well, so we got to be keyed in on our rush plan as well. So, yeah.
All right, so just an interesting note to give you guys as we get closer and closer to Sunday Night Football. The first time that J.J. McCarthy will connect with Justin Jefferson tonight will make Jefferson tie with Larry Fitzgerald as the youngest player in the NFL to reach 500 career catches. This is a astute skill position team that they have with the Minnesota Vikings. Like Jesse Bates said, it's going to come down to the scheme of how to beat this offense with J.J. McCarthy at the helm.
Yeah, I mean, listen, there's no getting around the fact that Jefferson's one of the best, if not the best, wide receiver in the National Football League. And yes, he's got a new quarterback, and they're still trying to figure each other out. But he found a way to get in the end zone last week. And the one thing that you don't want to do is get Jefferson excited and have him grittying all across the end zone in Minnesota, because everybody's going to go on command, right? On command. I mean, this guy is absolutely electric. And trust me, Kevin O'Connell is going to find ways to try to get the ball in his hands. He's going to try to force feed him as much as possible, because throughout the course of his career, good things happen when he gets the ball in his hands. So this is why Jesse Bates and Xavier Watts in the corners, they're going to have their hands full, because he is one of the best in the league, and he will make you pay if you leave him open in space.
That's right. Well, we asked Jesse Bates about this offense, and what they are able to do. We asked Zach Robinson, the offensive coordinator, about this defense and what Brian Flores brings to the floor tonight in Sunday Night Football.
Someone who's coming up with the scheme, what's the most difficult aspect of preparing for Brian Flores' defense with the way that he disguises and can kind of do anything at the extremes?
Yeah, they're a great challenge, very similar to last week, with Todd Bowles. I would say on our schedule, those two are, from a schematic standpoint, make you think through everything. And so got a ton of respect for those guys. Obviously, we saw them last year. There's a lot of similar players. There's similar things that they do from a front and coverage standpoint, but they make you work through a lot of things and make sure that you're on the screws with the details and making sure you don't have dead plays and things like that. But I'm sure there'll be something that's new that we haven't seen, and that's where you just got to adjust in real time and take it from there. But definitely, they got great players. They're very well coached, have a ton of respect for B-Flow and just what he's done over the course of career. But like I said, they definitely make you prepare for everything.
All right, well, Brian Flores is one of the most well-respected defensive coordinators in the league, and he's kind of known for having positionless players all across the board, from the first all the way to the way backfield. So looking at Brian Flores and this defense, how does this offense and Michael Penix work around what he's got going?
You know, Zach Robinson said we got to be on our screws and got to be tight to the details, right? And I think a lot of this goes back to the quarterback because you got a couple of options here when you're going up against an attacking and, as you mentioned, a defensive corner that likes positionless players, which means we've got linebackers that I can bring on pressure. I can bring them off the edge. I can drop them back into zone. We can do the same thing with corners coming off the slot or safeties coming down in the box. What that translates to me is Michael Penix has got to study tape all week, which we know that's already done because we're almost at game time. But he's got to be able to see the defense, right? When they start creeping safeties down, he's got to know pressure is coming. Do I have my protection directed the right way? If not, you've got to make sure everybody's directed in the right way because you can't afford to have free runners coming in your face. If not, ball gets out quickly. And then the last thing is your wide receivers and tight ends, you've got to win at the line of scrimmage. You've got to create separation immediately so he sees your jersey and he finds a lane that he can get the ball out of his hands, because you can't just say we're going to play screen game and we're going to try to dump the ball out. You got to take some shots downfield, but you can do that when Penix sees how they're trying to attack them, and then he makes sure that he's got everything picked up and then find that one-on-one matchup down the field.
Yeah, I brought it up last week about this Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense and how much they like to blitz and how much Todd Bowles likes to blitz, but the same goes for the Vikings. They blitzed 49% of snaps last year. They have 49 sacks, 24 interceptions, and 9 fumble recoveries. That's all from pressuring the quarterback and bringing constant pressure to the quarterback, getting in the quarterback's head. That is what Brian Flores likes to do, and it's going to be really fun to watch how the Falcons took last week and the blitz rate that they got from the Buccaneers and how they implement that this week against the Minnesota Vikings. It's going to be really exciting because we have an inactive that is huge for the Minnesota Vikings. Let's go ahead and get to the inactives today, presented by Emory Healthcare. As you can see on the Vikings side, Jeff Okudah, he is out under concussion protocol. And then there's that number 43, Andrew Van Ginkel.
Yeah, he's pretty good.
Pretty good outside linebacker, if I do say so myself. He will be inactive tonight, which does help this Falcons offense. But if you look on the Falcons side, obviously Younghoe Koo, he will be inactive today. Casey Washington will be inactive. Someone that's not inactive today, though, is Darnell Mooney. He will be back with this Falcons offense while Andrew Ginkel is on the sideline. What do you take away from these inactives today?
So I thought it was refreshing on Friday when I got the injury report and I saw that Darnell Mooney was not on it and that he did not have an injury designation, which means Atlanta is getting back to closer being full strength, right? So it doesn't necessarily have to be all on Drake London and Ray McLeod. And it was good last week. I mean, I think Michael Penix did a nice job of getting Kyle Pitts more involved in the game plan last week. But now you put Mooney in a legit deep threat in the season that he's coming off of, assuming that he's healthy. Trust me, they're not going to put him back out on the field if they don't feel like he's truly ready to go and he's ready to compete and contribute for this team. But the fact that they've got a full complement of pass catching options is going to be so encouraging, especially with Minnesota being down a couple of really important players in their linebacker and secondary unit. Got to be able to take advantage. Listen, there's been times Atlanta has played. I think about the Saints game last year when the Saints didn't have a whole lot of guys playing and they had just fired their head coach. Atlanta still ended up losing the game. You still have to go execute no matter who is on the field or who is out of the game.
It certainly helps that Darnell Mooney is back. Harrison Smith will be inactive today with the Vikings. Second week in a row, he will be inactive with a reported illness. Darnell Mooney will be back. I think what you saw last week with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers was that Drake was being double teamed a lot. Maybe with Mooney, that will kind of give Drake a little bit more free reign to be able to get downfield and make some big plays. Let's go ahead and get to the keys to the game presented by Wells Fargo. You got 3 for me tonight. Go ahead.
I got them. Let's establish the run game is going to be first and foremost. And that was one of the things that I thought about last week as I was watching that game, especially in the second half, was just like, oh my gosh, the Falcons are not able to run the football. And if the defense does not have to respect the run game, guess what they're going to do? They're going to start dropping back. They're going to just play with 4 or 5 in the box because they feel like they can stop the run with that. Atlanta has got to get Minnesota out of that. They have got to get the safety to come down in the box because they've got to get the extra guy down there because Atlanta is gashing them. That's what you want to see from Minnesota is they need to make adjustments to stop the run game. Tampa did not do that last week. Atlanta has to be able to run the football better. Again, I said it earlier in the show. This team is built too well to be a dominant running football team, and we didn't see it last year. Atlanta did run the football well in the game last year against Minnesota. That needs to happen again tonight in prime time.
It needs to happen, especially because that is kind of the cornerstone of this Falcons offense. What's your second key to the game tonight?
Yeah, it's going to be the turnover margin. And listen, I could probably tell you this every single week because this is the most telling stat when it comes to the National Football League. And again, you could look back last year, it was just not good. That was the game where Kirk Cousins had a couple of interceptions. We also had a fumble. We lost the turnover margin, ended up losing the game. You go back and analyze the box score from Atlanta against Minnesota last year, you're going to see, well, Atlanta won that matchup. Atlanta won that matchup. They had more yards, but they lost the turnover margin. And that's what happens in the league when you lose the turnover margin, whether that's giving it away on offense, not creating them on defense. It is extremely difficult to win any football game. So many things have to go your way when you lose the turnover margin. That's got to be an area that Atlanta wins. Still trying to fix it from last year, right? It's making plays on defense, protecting the ball on offense.
Yeah, some really big plays last week that could have ended in turnovers. We'll see if that can happen tonight against the Vikings. What's your third and final key for me?
Is winning the red zone matchup. Okay, and so this is not just the offense having success in the red zone. This is both sides. Atlanta needs to be really good offensively when they get opportunities. Think about playing on the road, right? If you're going to get into the 20 and then all of a sudden you stub your foot and you got to settle for field goals. Granted, there is a new kicker. You'd like to think Parker Romo's going to feel comfortable with a 35-yard field goal, but you can't get down there and settle for field goals. You got to find a way to get 7 points on the board, put the pressure back on Minnesota. Once again, I'm going to say it. Last year, Minnesota was lights out in the red zone. Atlanta was not. That's part of the reason why the Falcons ended up losing that game. So winning on offense means putting points on the board. If you have to settle for a field goal, it happens sometimes. But focus is on getting 7, getting touchdowns, and then when the defense, when Minnesota does get in the red zone, is can we get those stops? Can we force them to a field goal attempt, or can we get that strip sack? Can we get the interception? Any of those will help get those stops in the red zone, keep points off the board. So it's winning the red zone matchup for both sides of the ball.
Yeah, it was a major issue on both sides of the ball last year for this Falcons team. So I've got my preference. He actually took my preference before we started this show. It was going to be turnovers, but he took it. So I'm just going to make a new one, which is staying on schedule. I would like to see Michael Penix and this offense stay on schedule tonight. Do we know that Michael Penix can make these long throws downfield if he has to, if it's second and long, third and long? Yes, he can make those. But does he need to? Absolutely not. If we can stay on schedule and we can get the ball moving downfield at a good pace and find our rhythm quickly, I think that will be nothing but good for Michael Penix. I like to see how far he can throw the ball, but maybe not so much tonight.
Look, she just mad because she didn't get her preference in fast enough.
We know. It's just that we've been working so long together
she's over
that
here,
we
got sour grapes.
We read each other's minds.
Not getting it in on time.
And maybe it's just that obvious that we need to get some turnovers for this Falcons defense. Well, you guys, we're going to think about our keys and our preferences for next week's game against Carolina Panthers. Right now, I'm going to get it in before you next week. Just keep your email locked up on that. But we thank you guys so much for joining us for the Falcons pregame show. As the Vikings host the Falcons, we will see you guys next week as Panthers host the Falcons in an NFC South showdown. See you guys next week.